The story took place in a house that seemed peaceful and normal, but the peace of that place was about to be shattered forever. A painful memory surfaced. An angry man's voice echoed in her mind, promising she'd regret leaving him for someone else for the rest of her life. The memory hit her hard, making her heart race in her chest. The shock of those words still felt recent. Someone called her name, Shion Lee, and pulled her back to reality. But the damage was already done. The day was beautiful and sunny, a cruel contrast to the darkness she felt inside. Seeing a happy couple walking hand in hand was the trigger. Their happiness was a reminder of what she had just lost. And so, while others made cheerful plans, Shion found herself alone in a restaurant, trying to escape her own mind. Her state was so pitiful that even the restaurant owner noticed. He wondered what could have happened for someone to drink in broad daylight. She downed a glass of soju, hoping the drink could erase the pain she felt, but the alcohol only fueled her anger. She slammed the glass on the table, her thoughts fixed on the man who betrayed her. At that moment, sadness gave way to a cold determination. A decision had been made in her mind. To understand what happened, the story goes back to an hour before everything fell apart. An hour earlier, Shion was completely different. She walked up the stairs happily, humming, while planning to surprise her boyfriend. Full of anticipation, she arrived at his apartment and rang the bell, eager to see his reaction. But no one answered. She waited at the door and confusion began to take over. Something felt very wrong. He finally answered, forcing a nervous smile. He tried to act like he was happy with the surprise, but the sweat on his face gave away that something was very wrong. Shion, still unaware of the gravity of the situation, insisted on entering, but he blocked her at the door, using the flimsy excuse that the house was a mess. It was at that moment that her smile disappeared. A chill ran down her spine as she realized that it wasn't just a mess he was hiding, and her hunch was confirmed in the worst possible way. Standing in the middle of the room was another woman. Shion's world collapsed in a second. Caught red-handed, her boyfriend tried to explain himself. Stuttering, he said that the girl was just a subordinate from work who came to resolve an urgent matter. The lie was so obvious it was pathetic. He could barely look at her, desperately trying to maintain the charade that had already crumbled. To make matters worse, the other woman introduced herself with a frightening calm. She said her name was Sang-min, and that she was his wife. Shion wasn't being cheated on, her boyfriend was married. The shock was so great that the box with the cake simply slipped from her hands. The surprise she had planned with so much care shattered on the floor, just like her heart. The scene transported her to a painful memory. The image of a fortune teller appeared in her mind, shouting a prediction that, at that moment, made terrible sense. She remembered sitting in front of him while the man prepared to read her future, a future she wasn't at all ready to hear. His prediction was short and brutal. All her romances were doomed to be with men who were no good, a true love curse. At the time, Shion reacted with pure indignation. She couldn't believe the audacity of those words and left there furious with what she considered complete nonsense. But in the end, the fortune teller was right. Back in the present, the only thing left was to drown her sorrows in alcohol, alone. She wondered if that was really her destiny, to be deceived once again, trapped in a cycle of relationships with the worst possible people. As night fell over the city, loneliness and sadness weighed even heavier. The only certainty Shion had was that that night would be very long. After drowning her sorrows, Shion finally went home, or at least to what she thought was her home, since she could barely keep her balance. But upon entering, she came across an unknown man in the kitchen who greeted her with a friendly smile. The shock was instantaneous. Shion froze at the door, letting her things fall to the floor. That was definitely not the apartment she expected to find. Her mind raced, trying to process the scene. Who was that guy? A thief, or worse? Had she entered the wrong house? But the idea of a thief didn't make the slightest sense. After all, what kind of intruder would stop to cook in the middle of the job? The confusion only increased. The stranger, on the other hand, remained calm, preparing to explain the bizarre situation. Still in a panic, Shion tried to assert herself, stating that that was her house, even though the doubt had already been planted in her mind. The man was silent for a moment, just listening to what she had to say. Then, to Shion's surprise, he bowed politely. He explained that he was from a cleaning service and asked if she was the person who had requested the job. And that's when it clicked for Shion. She remembered that she had, in fact, hired the service. The shame of the gaffe was immediate and overwhelming. An extremely awkward silence filled the room. After almost accusing the man of being an intruder, Shion didn't know where to put her face. Without another word, the young man said goodbye and left, leaving Shion alone with her embarrassment. As soon as the door closed, Shion's legs gave way and she collapsed to the floor. She couldn't believe the scene she had just starred in. The only explanation she could find was that she must have completely lost her mind. Soon after, her phone rang. To her surprise, it was the manager of the cleaning company, calling to talk about what had just happened. On the other end of the line, the cleaning company manager greeted her. To Shion's surprise, he seemed quite friendly and sincerely apologized for any inconvenience his employee may have caused. Shion was completely mortified. After all, it was all her fault. She tried to reply that it was okay, but the shame was evident. The conversation continued professionally, and Shion took the opportunity to praise the employee's work, mentioning that he had done a great job both cleaning and cooking. She remembered how spotless the house was when she arrived, and not only that, he had also prepared a complete meal for her. Moved, she asked the manager to convey her gratitude to the young man, as she wasn't in her right mind at the time to thank him, as she should. The manager promised to pass on the message. After ending the call, Shion could finally breathe a sigh of relief. That nightmare of embarrassment had somehow resolved itself in a positive way. But then, a thought struck her. She felt like she had seen that employee somewhere before. An image of him came to her mind, but she couldn't identify where she knew him from. The feeling was familiar, but the memory wasn't. The memory of him cooking in her kitchen was vivid, but the question remained, who was he after all? Later, to clear her head from all this confusion, Shion decided to go out for dinner. She arrived at the agreed-upon restaurant, looking for her friend among the tables. Soon, a hand went up, calling her attention. It was her friend who was already waiting for her. Her friend, Juri, had already gone ahead and ordered the food. Shion thanked her, saying that she had a great idea. To top it off, Juri offered a new craft beer that the restaurant had. It seemed like the perfect night to vent about recent events. Shion accepted her friend's suggestion with a smile. A night to relax was all she needed after that strange day. But, to Juri's surprise, Shion turned down the drink and raised her hand, calling the waitress to place a different order. Instead of the beer, the young woman asked for just a lemonade, leaving her friend somewhat confused by the choice. Juri then questioned her, remembering that Shion had said she was going to meet her boyfriend that weekend. The question hit home. Shion's answer left Juri completely shocked. She had no idea what had happened. With a melancholic smile, Shion explained that she had broken up with her boyfriend a while ago. She said things just happened, but inside the truth was much more painful. She didn't have the courage to say that her ex was married and that she felt destined to get involved with the wrong guys. Shion feared that if she told the whole truth, her best friend would end up being disappointed in her. Realizing the discomfort, Juri changed tactics. She said that Shion was too good for him anyway, and offered her a piece of food to cheer her up. The gesture touched Shion deeply. She was grateful that her friend didn't ask any more questions, just offered unconditional support. Shion accepted the food, feeling the comfort of friendship in that difficult moment. Little by little, the heavy atmosphere dissipated, and the two friends simply enjoyed the meal together, with the tension finally broken. After a while, Shion finally started to open up. She admitted that she was feeling very down after the breakup. However, she said that going to work and seeing her students helped her feel a little better, and that there was something else cheering her up too. Her job as a teacher was her refuge. The routine at school and the energy of the students helped her forget her problems, at least for a while. The scene returned to Shion's workday. Despite saying that school cheered her up, she was still struggling to concentrate, needing to force herself to focus on the next class that was about to begin. That's when One of her students, Sora, approached her in the hallway. The young woman seemed genuinely concerned about the teacher. The student commented that Shion looked exhausted, even though it was so early, and asked if she was feeling well. Shion tried to downplay the situation. She replied that it was just a bad night's sleep and that there was no reason to worry. The teacher smiled, trying to reassure the student, although she was still clearly dejected. But the young girl wasn't satisfied with the answer and decided to do something about it. With a gesture of pure kindness, Sora offered the teacher a sweet, hoping to cheer her up a little. Shion was completely surprised and touched by the unexpected affection of that small gift. Sora then wished the teacher a good night's sleep. A simple gesture, but it meant the world to Shion at that moment. Back in the present, Shion finished telling Juri this story, super excited, thinking the student's attitude was the cutest thing in the world. Juri, however, didn't seem impressed at all. With pure sarcasm, she said she was dying of envy and began to complain about her own day. Without paying much attention, Juri changed the subject. She announced that her boyfriend's birthday party would be moved up and asked if Shion could still go. Shion confirmed that everything was fine. It was then that Juri commented excitedly that she would finally meet Shion's younger and cute boyfriend. A little embarrassed, Shion replied that she hadn't bragged that much about him. The simple mention of this boyfriend made Juri spit out all her drink. Completely shocked, apparently she had no idea who Shion was talking about. Juri didn't buy the excuse. She doubted that Shion hadn't bragged, reminding her friend of the big fuss she herself had made about this boyfriend. But the conversation was suddenly interrupted. Shion's cell phone vibrated on the table, and the name on the screen left no doubt who it was: Honey. At that instant, the world seemed to stop for Shion. It was him. Without hesitating, she answered the call with a smile on her face. She explained that she was having dinner and arranged to meet at another time. While Shion was on the phone, Juri watched her with a satisfied smile. Seeing her so happy was a relief, and her friend hoped that this boyfriend was really a good person. Meanwhile, in a bar on the other side of town, the other end of the line was quite busy. And there he was, Honey. The guy was talking on the phone with a silly and loving expression, arranging to meet her the next day. The sappy conversation continued, with him insisting that he already missed her. Beside him, a friend watched the scene, totally apathetic to the display of affection. After finally hanging up, he continued laughing to himself, still on cloud 9 because of the call. His friend Yujin, on the other hand, seemed to be on another planet, completely oblivious to his colleague's happiness. But suddenly, Yujin seemed to wake up from that trance. Something made him react. The friend in love was surprised by the silence. He commented that Yujin would normally already be complaining about how sappy and cliché that conversation had been. The difference between the two was striking. While one was on cloud 9, the other seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Realizing that his friend wasn't well, he tried to cheer him up. He mentioned that the problem with a client was already resolved and that Yujin didn't need to worry so much. But Yujin didn't seem convinced at all. With a heavy expression, he hesitated, implying that the story about the client was far from over. Hamin tried to change the subject, insisting that the client was grateful and that Yujin could simply forget this story. He seemed a little anxious to leave the problem behind. The attempt worked, but Yujin's reaction was one of pure surprise at the new topic. Hamin, on the other hand, smiled, satisfied to have finally diverted his friend's attention. He insisted that Yujin relax and put work aside for a moment. Yujin picked up his glass, still processing the sudden change of subject. Hamin then took the opportunity to remind him about his birthday party next week, confirming if he remembered the change of time. Yujin said yes. Excited, Hamin commented that at the party, Yujin would finally meet the woman he talked so much about. He picked up his cell phone to look for a photo of her. While his friend looked for the image, Hamin watched him with an expectant expression, eager to see his reaction. And then, upon finding the photo, something immediately caught Yujin's attention. The image showed two women. Hamin explained that his girlfriend was the one wearing blue, but that's not who Yujin focused on. His gaze was fixed on the other girl in the photo. Hamin smiled, happy with the idea of being able to see his girlfriend again soon, commenting to himself how she was closer than he imagined. Only for Yujin, the world stopped at that moment. He froze as he recognized the familiar face on the screen. Completely shocked, he asked if that was really his girlfriend. His friend's confirmation left him speechless. Yujin's mind went into overdrive, trying to understand that impossible coincidence. It was her, Miss Lee. Yujin couldn't believe that his best friend's girlfriend was precisely the woman he couldn't get out of his head. Far from the commotion brewing elsewhere, Miss Lee's life continued at its own pace. On that particular day, she was radiant, filled with a joy she could barely contain. Spring had arrived at the school, and with it, the season of cherry blossoms, a scene that always seemed to promise new beginnings and good news. It was just another day in the teacher's lounge, a place of routines and small interactions that made up the school's daily life. As the students arrived, each immersed in their own world, the educator's stories began to unfold. For Miss Lee, the days on the calendar seemed to pass more slowly, as if she were waiting for a specific moment. She gazed thoughtfully at a picture of a cherry tree. The drawing seemed to have a special meaning, awakening memories and plans. Suddenly, a sound startled her from her thoughts, making her look towards the entrance of the room. It was David Oh, the math teacher. At 33, he was one of her co-workers. He greeted her with a gentle smile, commenting on how time seemed to be flying by. As it was already April, David mentioned that the midterms would be here before they knew it, but the cherry blossoms early this year made everything seem lighter. The conversation about cherry blossoms hung in the air, a reminder of the fleeting beauty of the season. Miss Lee agreed, saying that she also needed to make time to see them before they fell. The idea seemed to cheer her up quite a bit. Seeing an opportunity, David mustered his courage. With a bit of hesitation, he started to ask if she was free on the weekend. But before he could finish the sentence, they both turned sharply. Someone had arrived, completely interrupting the moment. Standing before them was the principal. His serious expression made it clear that the conversation wouldn't be about flowers or outings. The principal's arrival completely changed the atmosphere in the room. His expression was not friendly at all, and the silence that followed was immediate and heavy. Feeling the opportunity slip away, David Oh discreetly backed away. The invitation to see the cherry blossoms would have to wait for another time. A co-worker watched the scene from afar, noticing the strange tension that arose between the teacher and the principal. She reflected that she always had the impression that the principal didn't like David, even though he was a kind person and a good professional. Something was wrong there. Shortly after, David and the principal left the room, walking down the hallway in an uncomfortable silence. The workday finally came to an end, and night began to fall over the city. David headed to the K Hotel. He seemed to have an important appointment that night. Already dressed elegantly, he checked his watch, waiting anxiously for someone. His heart beat faster, just thinking that he would soon meet Miss Lee. He had waited a long time for this moment. The story then takes us to another place, at a different time, at a cleaning services company called Clean Peace. A job interview was taking place. A young man sat before the interviewer, presenting his documents for the position. However, during the conversation, something the interviewer said left the young man completely stunned. But that initial shock quickly turned into something else. An unexpected feeling made him blush and smile. The young man's mind alternated between confusion and enchantment. The proposal he heard was as bizarre as it was attractive. The interviewer brought up the candidate's birthday, a question that left him completely confused about its relevance to the job. The boss, on the other hand, seemed to be amused by the situation, explaining with a smile that he could hardly wait for the young man's special day. The mention of that day made the young man blush, admitting that he was so excited that he could hardly wait to leave work early. With a newfound air of confidence, he recomposed himself, feeling like the center of attention for a brief moment. But the interviewer brought him back to reality, jokingly scolding him to be careful with the tone he was using. Soon after, the manager got lost in thought, remembering a woman he had met before. He hoped that this time she would recognize him and they could talk longer. The mere memory of her made him a little embarrassed, warming his face with a silent expectation. Suddenly, the ringtone of his cell phone in his pocket broke the mood, interrupting his reverie. He answered, and, on the other end of the line, it was Secretary Yang. The man found the call strange, wondering why his grandmother's secretary, the president of the company, would be calling. He listened attentively, the worry growing in his eyes as he received the message. The order was clear. The president demanded that he clear his schedule for next Thursday and await further instructions. The details would come later. After agreeing, he lowered his cell phone, feeling a familiar weight with the situation. It was always like this. His grandmother never changed, communicating only what she wanted, with no room for dialogue. 20 years had passed, and nothing was different. Sighing, the manager thought he would need to let Hamin know about the change of plans. The sudden call had completely ruined his good mood, but before he could walk away, a hand reached out trying to stop him from leaving. The hand held him firmly, pulling him back at the last second. A car sped past, exactly where he had been a moment before. A tragedy was narrowly avoided. The shock was so great that the young man could barely process it. He realized that he had almost been run over. In the blink of an eye, his entire life could have ended right there. That's when he saw the woman who saved him. She warned him about the danger, saying that he should walk on the sidewalk. Still holding his arm, she stared at him worried. He in turn was trying to understand what had just happened. And that's when he recognized her. It was Miss Lee. Realizing that she was still holding him, she released his arm quickly, visibly nervous about the situation. An awkward silence settled between the two, broken only by a forced laugh from Miss Lee. She felt completely uncomfortable. The whole situation was too strange. But the young man didn't feel the same. On the contrary, he was visibly embarrassed and grateful, unable to hide the blush on his face. Miss Lee noticed his reaction. That expression wasn't that of someone who had just escaped an accident. There was something more there. With a sincere smile, he thanked her from the bottom of his heart. He was genuinely touched by her gesture. His sincerity caught her off guard, and now it was Miss Lee's turn to feel her face heat up. The intensity of that thank you left her completely speechless. Miss Lee didn't expect to feel her heart race like that for a stranger. For a moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. There was a heavy silence, a tension that neither of them knew how to break. But the moment was broken by a familiar voice. It was Yuri, Shion's friend, who suddenly appeared, waving excitedly. Yuri approached, surprised to find them there, and commented that they had arrived earlier than expected. Her arrival caught the young man completely by surprise. Curious, Yuri looked at the man and asked Shion if she knew him, noticing the strange atmosphere that had formed between the two. Miss Lee tried to disguise her nervousness with a sheepish smile, not knowing exactly what to answer. The young man was also embarrassed, trying to explain that the situation was nothing like it seemed. To end the awkward moment, the man said goodbye hastily, and Shion returned the bow. Yuri just watched, confused. Already walking away, Yuri asked if she had made her friend wait too long, still trying to understand what had just happened. But Miss Lee wasn't paying much attention. She couldn't resist and looked back one last time. He was still there, standing in the same place, watching her leave. That quick encounter had left a mark. Suddenly, the scene changed completely. Shion was now at a lively birthday party for a friend named Hamin. Everyone was applauding and celebrating amidst confetti. Hamin, the birthday boy, thanked everyone for coming with a toast, seeming genuinely happy with the celebration. Hamin's birthday party was in full swing, with a table full of food inviting everyone to help themselves. As she prepared to grab a plate, Shion seemed a little distracted, deciding what she would eat first amidst the celebration. That's when her friend Yuri called her, excited to finally officially introduce her boyfriend, who was the birthday boy himself. Yuri introduced Hamin Kim with pride, explaining that he was the director of a company. Hamin greeted Shion with a friendly smile. Next, Yuri introduced Shion as her best friend and teacher. The exchange of pleasantries was polite, but something bothered Shion. She felt like she had heard Hamin's voice before. There was a strange familiarity that she couldn't immediately identify. And then, the memory came like a flash. It was the same voice as the director of Clean Peace, the cleaning company she had spoken to on the phone. The shock was instantaneous. Still processing the coincidence, Shion tried to act normal, while Haman and Juri recounted that they had been friends since college. She figured that with so many clients, it would be impossible for him to recognize her voice. It was better to just let it go. Suddenly, Yuri touched Haman's shoulder, drawing his attention to another person approaching the group. She asked who the tall and elegant man was on the other side of the room, mentioning that she had seen him briefly at the entrance. Hamin smiled and, without hesitating, called the man over to join them. Waving for him to come closer, he introduced him as Yujin Oh, his best friend, and to everyone's surprise, the co-president of the company. Shion was stunned. She couldn't believe that the co-president of a company would be personally working in the field service, and that's when it finally clicked. That was the same guy she had hired to clean her house. The world seemed too small at that moment. Hamin continued the conversation, explaining that his friendship with Yujin was so strong that he considered him closer than some of his own relatives. Then, he turned to his friend and casually asked if he had a girlfriend. Faced with the question, Yujin calmly replied that, at the moment, he didn't have anyone. He said it with a confidence that seemed to enchant everyone in the room. Shion, however, could barely process the information. The co-president of such an important company, and single on top of that? The whole situation was surreal. Yujin maintained a polite smile, which only made the encounter even more unbelievable for her. At that moment, Hamin's wife approached, saying she was going to introduce him to some more friends. Hamin still tried to say he would be right back, but it was already too late. With a quick wave, his wife pulled him into the crowd, leaving a void in his place. And so, suddenly Shion and Yujin were completely alone. An awkward silence filled the air. Neither of them knew exactly what to say. It was Yujin who broke the ice. He turned to Shion and asked if she happened to remember him. Shion gave a nervous laugh, finding it obvious that he was referring to the cleaning service at her house. But Yujin surprised her. He said he wasn't talking about that, and revealed that they had met long before that day. The revelation left her completely confused. She searched her memories, but couldn't remember any other encounter. His question hung in the air, leaving Shion even more intrigued. Where else could they have crossed paths? Faced with Shion's confusion, Yujin was silent for a moment, just observing her reaction. The anticipation in the air was almost palpable. He gave a slight sigh, with a touch of disappointment in his gaze. In a low voice, he simply stated the obvious. She really didn't remember him. Shion was completely embarrassed. The way he looked at her made her feel strangely guilty. She panicked internally, wondering why she felt it was her fault for not recognizing him. Yujin seemed to notice her discomfort and gave a shy smile. He put his hand to his chest, preparing to give a hint that might refresh her memory. Shion stared at him, attentive. Curiosity now outweighed confusion, and she waited anxiously for the explanation. Then, he revealed the first clue. Their meeting had happened 8 years ago, when he graduated from Susung High School, where she also studied. Suddenly, an image from the past began to form in Shion's mind. She felt a click, a fragment of memory coming to the surface. The memory was of a music room, 2 young people sitting on the floor distant from each other, both looking completely desolate, and she remembered his face. The boy was crying, with a clearly broken heart. Everything fell into place. Shocked, Shion finally understood. She asked incredulously if he was the senior from that day in the music room. Yujin just smiled, confirming her memory. After 8 years, the thread that connected them in the past had been rediscovered. Yujin was visibly relieved and a little embarrassed. After so long, being remembered by her meant much more than he let on. That moment in the past, which seemed forgotten, suddenly regained an importance that neither of them expected. Shion stared at him, trying to connect the image of the depressed boy from 8 years ago with the successful man in front of her. The difference was huge. It finally clicked. She felt bad for not recognizing him before and apologized, admitting that 8 years was indeed a long time. Yujin reassured her, saying it was no problem. He even admitted that it was understandable, since he was just a high school senior back then. He added that she was just a freshman when they met in person. The circumstances were quite different. With a smile, he joked, commenting that she seemed to have grown quite a bit since then. The conversation took her back to her school memories, a time of great stress. She remembered how she only really started growing when she finally got to college. Back in the present, her explanations seemed to make perfect sense to him. Then, Yujin changed the subject, mentioning that another person, a Hamin, also studied at their school back then. The conversation continued during dinner, which had been set aside until then. He then asked if she also remembered Hamin, but Shion hesitated, admitting that she didn't recall anyone by that name. Yujin seemed satisfied with the answer. He concluded with a slight air of presumption that if that was the case, then he must be the only senior she knew. His confidence caught her off guard, but she couldn't deny that he was probably right. Shifting the focus of the conversation from the past to the present, Yujin asked a question about her work, curious about her professional life. The scene changed to an earlier moment, with one of the guys proudly showing off his impeccable house, which was all tidied up to receive the guests. Back at the party, Hamin joined Yujin and Shion at the table. Meanwhile, the other friend of the group was already approaching, excited for the celebration. With a contagious smile, she raised her glass and proposed a toast to celebrate the moments between the four friends. Yujin agreed right away, but warned that he would toast with water because of some medication. The sudden excuse made Hamin somewhat suspicious. Putting the strangeness aside, the group gathered for the main toast, the celebration of Hamin Kim's birthday, and with a lively cheers, the glasses met, sealing the celebration of that special day. Their friend took advantage of the party atmosphere to suggest that the four of them should go out to dinner together more often. Shion got excited about the idea and went further, proposing that they could even travel to some cool place in the future. The conversation about future plans continued, with the suggestion of a camping trip coming up in the middle of the party. The night wore on, and the celebration at the elegant hotel seemed to have been a real success. Hours later, the hall was empty, with only the remnants of a party that had come to an end. Outside the hotel, one of the guests was saying goodbye, commenting on how fun the day had been. Hamin and Sean were talking on the way out. He thanked her for coming, saying that he had a lot of fun. Sean then insisted, saying that she would really like to give him a birthday present, but Hamin, charmingly, refused. He stated that the real gift was the time she took to be there with him. When the conversation ended, the other friends approached. Yuri and their colleague appeared to say goodbye and saw that Shion still didn't have a way to get home. The friend then gave the guy a little nudge, encouraging him to speak up. At that, Yujin offered to take Shion. He insisted that she go with him, assuring her that he would give her a ride. Shion, a little surprised, tried to politely decline. She said that she could take the subway without any problems, as she didn't live that far away. But the friends insisted. The guy joked that Yujin was a great driver and that she should accept the ride, since he hadn't had any accidents yet. Yujin just smiled, waiting for Shion's decision. Faced with everyone's insistence, she reconsidered the offer. In the end, Shion accepted. She said goodbye to her friends and agreed to go with Yujin. And so, the two set off through the city. Inside the car, a silence settled in. Shion seemed thoughtful, while Yujin focused on the road. The day's fatigue began to weigh on her. The car's comfort made her drowsy, and her thoughts began to scatter. Yujin noticed how exhausted she looked. He mentioned that he was tired too, but that he had a lot of fun that night. He then tried to break the formality between them, saying that Shion could speak to him more casually, since they would continue to see each other. Yujin even asked what she preferred to be called, thinking that using Miss Lee was a little strange between them. Shion reflected on this. She remembered that, although they had met in a formal context, it had been a long time and they had mutual friends like Yuri and Hamin. Shion agreed with his idea. She suggested that, since they had mutual friends, it would be a good opportunity to keep in touch and get to know each other better. Yujin was visibly pleased with her response. He replied that, of course, he would love for them to become friends. His positive and immediate reaction took Shion by surprise a little. She was silent for a moment, processing how easily the conversation flowed. Yujin, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease, maintaining a gentle smile as he waited for her reaction. Shion then smiled back, finally relaxing, and agreeing that she was also looking forward to this new friendship. With the ice broken, the atmosphere in the car became much lighter and more comfortable for both of them. A short time later, they arrived near a subway station, and Shion asked him to drop her off there. She thanked him for the ride, commenting on how much easier it had made her return home. With the farewell made, she released her seatbelt, ready to get out of the car. The sound of the door opening broke the silence of the night. Outside, Shion said goodbye once more, and Yujin wished her a safe trip home. As the car prepared to leave, a sudden thought crossed Shion's mind. She held onto her purse strap, a little nervous, wondering if she might have misinterpreted his intentions during the conversation. But then a doubt arose. She turned around and a little awkwardly decided to ask one last thing. Shion remembered that night in the car. Yujin seemed genuinely happy, driving through the city as they talked. She was surprised by his kindness, a feeling she didn't expect to feel. The image of him smiling like that was etched in her mind, almost like a perfect photograph. Since they exchanged numbers, the conversations were always light. Yujin worried if she would catch a cold, and wished her a good day. But now, at work, Shion couldn't stop thinking about it. It all started at Hamin's birthday party when they exchanged contacts. That day, he approached with a friendly smile, and the occasional messages started to arrive. He was the one who took the initiative to ask for her number, and the content of the messages was always normal, without ulterior motives. Was she misunderstanding everything? Maybe it was just politeness, since they hadn't seen each other since he graduated. She tried to convince herself that it was better this way. There was no reason to create an awkward atmosphere between them. With that in mind, she tried to put her cell phone aside and focus on work, but suddenly, a call pulled her from her thoughts, making her jump in her chair. It was the vice principal, and he didn't look happy at all. He questioned her about how long she had been working as a teacher, which left her completely speechless. Apparently, she had made a typo in an important document, and the pressure fell entirely on her. With her coworkers watching and the boss demanding that everything be corrected that morning, Shion felt like she was going to lose her mind. Shion felt that the vice principal was treating her as if she had lost her mind, judging her for a simple mistake she made. With an air of superiority, the man continued his sermon, acting as if he knew exactly what younger people were thinking. He insisted that he was saying all this for her own good, questioning who else would bother to point out her mistakes to save her skin. Then he dismissed her with a gesture, telling her to go fix the typos right away, as if he were talking to a child. Without having anything to answer, Shion simply bowed in obedience, swallowing the humiliation in front of everyone. Satisfied, the vice principal leaned back in his chair, watching her leave. As far as he was concerned, the mission was accomplished. She returned to her desk and simply collapsed into her chair, completely exhausted by the situation. Office life continued around her, but the feeling of having been exposed in front of her colleagues still weighed on her. Time passed and the bell rang, announcing the break. For the students, it was a moment of joy and freedom. While the students ran outside full of energy, Shion sat alone, isolated in her own thoughts. She felt a little dizzy, blaming the heavy lunch, but the truth is that the morning had drained all her energy, until suddenly she realized that someone was approaching. It was Mr. An, one of her colleagues. He walked towards her with a friendly smile, breaking the silence of the moment. He sat down next to her and struck up a casual conversation about lunch, trying to break the ice. That's when he touched on the morning's subject, saying that he thought the vice principal's attitude was very cruel. It was the first time someone had validated how she felt. Despite what happened, Shion tried to disguise it, saying that she didn't care about the vice principal's scolding, and that it was her fault after all. But when Mr. An insisted that the vice principal was just taking his problems out on her, the truth hit her hard. It destabilized her for a moment. He then explained the context. The vice principal was going through a complicated divorce, and that's why no one else dared to mention the word marriage in the teacher's room. Mr. An concluded, asking her not to blame herself for what happened. He just wanted Shion to know that it wasn't her fault. He looked at her sincerely, hoping his words could bring some comfort. Shion was speechless. His kindness was so unexpected that it left her completely embarrassed. She thanked him with a nervous laugh, still processing the fact that a colleague had bothered to try and cheer her up. As cherry blossoms fell around them, Mr. An watched her with a genuine smile. He felt good for having managed to, perhaps, alleviate some of the weight she was carrying. He then commented on the beauty of the flowers, bringing up a lighter subject. Shion agreed, reaching out to the falling petals. For the first time that day, she allowed herself a small moment of peace. Seeing her like that, so absorbed in the beauty of the scene, Mr. An felt his heartbeat a little faster. Meanwhile, in the hallway, other teachers were passing by gossiping, and one of them commented that Mr. An was the best catch among the co-workers, until one of them looked out the window and was completely shocked by the scene she saw. Outside, Shion and Mr. An were sitting together, completely unaware that this innocent conversation was about to become the school's new big rumor. Suddenly, one of the teachers called the others' attention, pointing to the window. Outside, they saw Shion, and she wasn't alone. Mr. An, the math teacher, was sitting right next to her, talking quietly. The colleagues' initial surprise quickly turned into suspicion. What could the two of them be doing together, alone like that? The gossip started to heat up. For them, the situation was, at the very least, suspicious. One of the teachers remembered having seen the two of them together before, which only served to fuel the group's imagination even more. In a matter of seconds, the innocent conversation outside turned into a big secret romance in their heads. Meanwhile, Mr. An continued the conversation, completely oblivious to the drama he was causing without even knowing it. Shion listened attentively, still processing his unexpected kindness after such a difficult day. But the gossip had already escalated to an absurd level. The teachers were already imagining a possible marriage between the two. One of them, more practical, remembered a school rule about relationships between employees. Apparently, if two teachers got married, one of them would have to be transferred to another school. But the simple mention of the word school made Shion's mind travel far away, to an old and painful memory. She remembered an order she received in the past. A voice said that she needed to attend that school, as there was something that only she could do. At that time, the young Shion accepted the mission, full of hope, and without understanding the true weight of those words. Back in the present, Shion's look changed completely. The small moment of peace she felt had just dissolved into thin air. After the painful memory, silence settled between Shion and Mr. An. The connection they felt for a moment seemed to have broken, leaving only a strange distance between them. Meanwhile, in the school hallways, the scene of the two had already become the main topic. The other teachers whispered, some thinking they made a good couple, others saying Shion was too good for him. That was enough for Shion to hear. The words reached her, confirming that her moment of vulnerability with Mr. An was now public knowledge. She remembered the peace she felt, seeing the petals, a feeling that now seemed distant. That moment became the trigger for a new problem, and Shion still had no idea of the size of the mess that was coming. The day was ending, and Shion Lee was finally heading home, hoping for some peace after everything she'd been through. She walked calmly through the neighborhood, still processing the recent events. The young woman was almost home, unaware of what awaited her just ahead. Her footsteps echoed on the sidewalk, marking the end of another difficult day, until suddenly she stopped. What she saw left her completely speechless. It was him. Her ex-boyfriend was there, waiting on a corner with a bouquet of flowers in his hand. The guy seemed anxious, checking his watch, clearly waiting for her with a plan in mind to redeem himself. Shion couldn't believe it. After everything he did, he had the nerve to show up there. She wondered why he was all dressed up and with flowers, something that wasn't like him. It clicked. He was trying to get back together. The first option that crossed her mind was simple. Just pretend he didn't exist and walk right past him, completely ignoring his presence. The second option was a little more direct. Kick him out of there without mercy, showing all her anger. But she knew neither would work. She needed to resolve this discreetly so it wouldn't become neighborhood gossip. She just wanted to disappear. And it was at that exact moment that her cell phone rang. A call from Yujin Oh, Salvation. Without thinking twice, Shion answered, surprised by the perfect timing of that call. On the other end of the line, Yujin asked if she had already left work and, very kindly, invited her to dinner. Seeing the call as her escape route, Shion accepted the invitation right away. She told Yujin that she would wait for him at the station where he dropped her off last time, arranging to meet soon. On the other end of the line, Yujin was a little surprised by her quick response, but agreed to pick her up without hesitation. While waiting, Shion peeked to see if her ex-boyfriend was still there. She needed to avoid him at all costs. And he was. The guy was still waiting with the bouquet of flowers, already starting to get impatient with her delay. But Shion's rider finally arrived. She waved to Yujin as soon as she saw him approaching the station. Yujin greeted her with a smile, inviting her into the car. Relieved, Shion got in and thanked him for coming. Finally, she was safe from that embarrassing situation. On the way, Yujin asked what she would like to eat, wanting to know her preferences. Shion remembered that last time she gave a vague answer, and he had to decide everything himself. She didn't want to repeat that. To make it easier, Yujin then asked if she had any allergies, and Shion replied that she didn't. He said he needed to make a quick call. Yujin called a restaurant, confirmed that there was a table for 2 available, and said they would arrive in 20 minutes. Shion was a little curious, not understanding exactly what his plan was. Upon hanging up, Yujin explained that he knew a good place and had already secured a table for them. Shion thought it was a great idea and agreed right away. A short time later, they arrived at their destination, a place that looked more like an elegant house than a regular restaurant. Yujin led her inside. Shion, who was following him, was immediately surprised by what she saw, realizing that the interior was even more impressive than the facade. She was amazed by the atmosphere. It wasn't a regular restaurant, but an intimate and sophisticated space with a table perfectly set, just for the 2 of them. Yujin invited her to sit down. Shion, still absorbing the beauty of the place, felt like she was in a dream. Soon after, dinner began to be served. A kind-looking lady, dressed as a chef, brought the dishes. Yujin explained that she was the owner and cook of the restaurant. The chef greeted them with a warm and welcoming smile. She served the table with several dishes, all with an impeccable presentation. Shion watched everything, enchanted by the care and attention. The meal seemed simple, but at the same time extremely appetizing. Yujin and the chef exchanged a nod, a gesture that showed the familiarity and respect between them. After ensuring everything was perfect, the chef discreetly withdrew, leaving them alone to enjoy dinner. Shion was in awe, thinking about how even the way the woman left the room was elegant. Yujin encouraged her to eat, assuring her that the food was excellent. Curious, Shion took her first bite. The moment she tasted it, she understood. The flavor was much better than she could have imagined, simply delicious. Seeing her reaction, Yujin smiled contentedly. He then revealed that this was one of his favorite places, as there was no fixed menu, and the chef prepared everything according to each customer's restrictions. Shion watched him, feeling her face flush. She realized that the elegant restaurant, the food, and the whole atmosphere suited him perfectly. Yujin enjoyed the moment in silence. For him, the elegant space and warm food were the perfect combination of comfort. Shion thought that this place really seemed to have been made for Yujin. The 2 continued dinner amidst pleasant conversation, enjoying each other's company. After the meal, the night continued at a nearby cafe. The atmosphere there was more casual, but still cozy. When it was time to pay, Shion took out her card, insisting on taking care of the cafe bill. But Yujin was faster and took the card from her hand, making it clear that he would pay for everything. Hearing his order, Shion noticed that Yujin seemed to like sweet drinks. The memory bothered her. All her ex-boyfriends also preferred sweets, and the comparison irritated her. She shook her head, trying to push the thought away. It wasn't fair to compare Yujin to those guys. Yujin noticed the change in her mood. With a gentle smile, he reassured her, perhaps calling her friend to break the tension. Only his gaze wasn't that of a simple friend. There was an affection there that went beyond friendship. Shion's heart raced. She realized that wasn't how you look at a friend, and the possibility that he felt something more left her speechless. After the cafe, Yujin offered to take Shion home, ending the night with another kind gesture. And so, they continued through the city's illuminated streets. The silence inside the car was thick. Shion was completely lost in her thoughts, replaying the last moments. She was desperately trying to remember the conversation they had. At the cafe, she had finally taken the initiative to ask the things she wanted to know about Yujin, but now, nothing. Her mind was blank. He, on the other hand, answered everything with an open and happy smile, seeming genuinely pleased to share a little of himself with her. That gentle and perhaps slightly loving look left her completely disarmed, and the result was that Shion was so nervous and focused on his expression that she didn't absorb a single word. She felt pathetic. What kind of person is so rude that they forget everything the other person said? Back in the present, the frustration was so great that she almost let out a real sob, imagining how disappointed Yujin would be. Shion was startled by her own noise, realizing that her internal crisis was almost leaking into the real world. Completely embarrassed, she tried to disguise it with a sheepish laugh, just as Yujin announced that they had arrived. He parked the car in front of her building. Only, to the surprise of both of them, there was another car parked there, and someone was getting out of it. Shion froze. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. It was her ex-boyfriend, waiting for her at her doorstep. The night was about to get worse. Reluctantly, Shion got out of the car. She knew she couldn't avoid the conversation that was about to happen. And there he was, with a bouquet of flowers and a huge smile, as if he were expecting a warm reception. But Shion's reaction was the purest and most uncomfortable silence. The ex-boyfriend's smile disappeared, the instant he realized she wasn't alone. Yujin got out of the car right after, and his calm and imposing presence completely changed the mood of the situation. In her ex's mind, the comparison was instant and brutal. He felt completely overshadowed. All the confidence he had for that approach simply crumbled to dust. Without saying a single word, the boy just cleared his throat and walked past them, completely defeated. Yujin, confused, asked if he had anything to do with it. Shion reflected that, although pathetic, it was a relief that her ex had misunderstood things. As she watched him walk away, she wondered how she never noticed this side of him when they were still together. With the situation resolved, Yujin's attention returned to Shion with a gentle smile. Shion thanked him, relieved. His help, even if unintentional, meant much more than he imagined. The farewell became a dance of politeness, with each insisting that the other go first. Laughing at the situation, Yujin finally gave in and said he would go first, ending the night. As she watched him leave, Shion felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Maybe the night hadn't been so bad after all. A teacher smiled, satisfied. Finally, she had heard the words she was hoping for directly from him, and that made her genuinely happy. The next day at school, the routine seemed to follow its normal course, as if nothing had happened the night before. The teacher proudly listened to a student excitedly telling her that her grades had improved dramatically. From afar, Yujin watched the scene. He couldn't help but notice how well her outfit suited her that day. A discreet smile appeared on his face as he walked away from the window, lost in his thoughts. But then, his gaze suddenly changed. Something, or rather someone, had caught his attention in the hallway. It was Shion. She stopped in the middle of the way, surprised to run into him there. The unexpected encounter left her speechless for a moment, not knowing what to do or say. At that moment, she remembered how it all started, when she mustered the courage to ask him for help. Yujin listened to her with a serious expression, understanding the weight and importance of her request. Back in the present, He was guiding her through the hallway, fulfilling his promise to help her. Shion followed him in silence, a mixture of nervousness and expectation growing with each step. Upon arriving at the room, he pulled out a chair for her. The session was about to begin. Shion waited, apprehensive, as Yujin prepared to listen to what she had to say. The young student waited, visibly apprehensive about what was to come. Suddenly, a stack of papers was thrown forcefully onto the table, causing her to flinch in fright. The tension in the room was palpable. The man stared down at her, clearly annoyed by the situation. She couldn't hold his gaze, feeling the weight of the scolding she was about to receive. He reprimanded her harshly, reminding her that she shouldn't call him that way at school. The condition for her being there was clear. Their family relationship should be kept an absolute secret. The girl just lowered her head, promising that she would stop. Tired, the man sighed and asked what she really wanted, since he knew that this wasn't a real counseling session. Nervously, she explained that their father wanted a family dinner on Friday and asked her to deliver the message. The mention of their father only increased his frustration, and he clenched his fist in silence. The young woman peeked, waiting for an answer, afraid of what he might say. He remained silent for a moment, the irritation still etched on his face. Seeing his reaction, she shrank back again, embarrassed for having insisted on the matter. He clicked his tongue, clearly displeased with the idea of the dinner. But to her surprise, he finally gave in and told her to tell their father that he would be there. After agreeing to the dinner, the man asked if she had anything else to say, making it clear the conversation was over. The young woman didn't respond. He then placed the papers back on her desk. The girl's silence seemed to surprise him for a moment. The click of the door closing was the sign that he had really left. A feeling of disappointment washed over her as she processed how cold and quick their interaction was. And so, she was alone again in the empty room, immersed in her thoughts. Outside, the man couldn't hide his own frustration with the situation. Later, as evening fell, the tension of the day began to dissipate. The school's teachers gathered for a get-together dinner at a local restaurant. The atmosphere was relaxed, with everyone chatting and enjoying the food and drinks to unwind. It was a rare opportunity for the faculty to connect outside of the work environment. The main course of the evening, beef ribs, was already on the grill, filling the air with a delicious smell. Everyone seemed to be having a good time, enjoying the meal and each other's company. However, one of the teachers was having an internal crisis. She realized that after eating so much of Yujin's food, her palate had become too demanding. She quickly scolded herself for thinking that, feeling a bit arrogant, and decided to just enjoy the dinner that was being offered. The conversation at the teacher's dinner started with gossip. One of the colleagues commented on the divorce of a teacher couple from the neighboring school, a fact that surprised everyone at the table. Another teacher added that, strangely, the divorce rate among educated couples seemed very high, which made the group thoughtful about the matter. Attention then turned to the principal. One of the teachers, curious, asked if he, with his long experience, had seen many couples forming and getting married over the years. The other teachers agreed, encouraging the principal to share his perspective on the topic. The expectation at the table was palpable. The principal gave a restrained smile. He did in fact have a lot of experience with the subject, especially since he had worked at that same school for quite some time. And then, he gave his honest opinion, which took everyone by surprise. He did not recommend that teachers get married. He clarified that obviously there were many couples that worked out, but the risk was great. His words carried the weight of years of observation. Therefore, he strongly advised teachers to think twice before starting a serious relationship in the workplace. It was a serious warning. The principal's advice caused some discomfort. One of the teachers even thought the message was directly for him, but soon realized it was a general warning for everyone. To break the tension, one of the teachers joked, suggesting that maybe the problem would be solved if the teachers waited until retirement to get married. The idea was met with laughter, and the teacher who made the joke, already feeling the effects of the drink, got excited about her own solution. The alcohol was clearly taking effect, making the night lighter and more relaxed for her. Amidst the relaxation, someone noticed the absence of Professor An, the most handsome in the school. A colleague explained that he couldn't come because of a family event. The teachers' dinner continued late into the night, with conversations and laughter filling the restaurant. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Professor An's so-called family event was taking place. But, unlike the colleagues' party, the atmosphere there was one of heavy and uncomfortable silence. Professor An's family event was, in fact, a dinner. But the silence at the table was so heavy that you could hear everyone's breathing. His father ate unhurriedly, completely ignoring the tension in the air. It felt like a business meeting, not a family meal. The young woman sitting next to the father tried desperately to look normal, but the forced smile and cold sweat betrayed her nervousness. She struggled to maintain her composure, but the situation was clearly too uncomfortable to disguise. In an attempt to break the ice, the girl began to eat animatedly, saying that she was enjoying it so much that she needed to savor every bite. Yujin, on the other hand, remained distant, just watching the scene unfold while drinking something. The father, with a satisfied smile, offered more food, commenting on how good the seasonal dishes were. A kindness that seemed to hide other intentions. The girl was left speechless, caught off guard by the sudden change in the atmosphere of the conversation. It was then that the father turned to Yujin and got straight to the point, saying that it was time for him to get married and stop living alone. Yujin didn't show any emotion, but his thoughts were clear. He already knew where that conversation was headed. With a small, ironic smile, Yujin finally broke the silence. His father continued, mentioning that he already had a good partner in mind for him, someone who also liked him, but Yujin interrupted him. He questioned whether his father had even asked if he was already seeing someone before arranging blind dates. The tension exploded. Yujin accused his father of only looking for him for business interests, and his father was shocked by his son's audacity. The girl next to him panicked at Yujin's father's outburst. He didn't accept the affront, questioning how his own son dared to speak to him that way. But Yujin wasn't intimidated for even a second. He maintained the accusation, pointing directly at his father. Suddenly, the discussion turned aggressive. Yujin stood up and punched the other man who was sitting at the table with them. His father was shocked by the scene, shouting that everything Yujin was saying was complete nonsense. For Yujin, that conversation was over. He got up from the table, determined to leave. Without looking back, he headed for the exit, stating that since they couldn't talk, he would go ahead. Before leaving, Yujin took one last look and made a final jab. He said he hated traditional Korean food, something his father obviously didn't know because he never cared. The door slammed shut, leaving his father behind, completely speechless at what had just happened. Once outside, Yujin sighed, exhausted by all the family drama. It was then that he picked up his cell phone to check the updates he received regularly. He opened the message, expecting a common report, but what he saw on the screen left him in shock. His eyes widened. The report showed a photo of Shion Lee meeting another man frequently. The atmosphere between them, the text said, seemed strange from time to time. Yujin's expression darkened instantly. The news hit him hard. He remembered Shion, convinced that they had something special. The idea of her being with someone else consumed him. The shock quickly turned into a cold order. He ordered to continue with the updates on Shion and find out exactly who that man was. After giving the order, Yujin Oh took a moment for himself. The decision to investigate Shion was already in motion, and there was no turning back. He made a call and made his instructions clear. From that moment on, anything suspicious about Shion should be reported to him immediately. Soon after, he sent a message to Shion herself, apologizing for the slowness in their relationship. A dangerous double game had begun. In his mind, the image of Shion was that of a happy and radiant woman. That was the woman he wasn't willing to lose to anyone. Later that night, Yujin headed to an important event. The place was packed, a bustling social event with music and conversations everywhere, an environment of appearances. And then he arrived. With a presence that did not go unnoticed, Yujin Oh entered the hall. Every step he took seemed calculated, exuding unwavering confidence. Despite the internal turmoil about Shion, on the outside he maintained the posture of a man who had everything under control. He glanced around the hall, ready to play his part that night. Soon, a woman spotted him and greeted him. It was his older sister, Yujin Oh. She commented that she didn't see their other brother, Yu-chan, and asked where he was. Yujin heard the question, but his attention seemed to be elsewhere, perhaps already expecting what was to come. His sister then explained that Yu-chan couldn't attend, as something unexpected had happened, but assured him that it was nothing to worry about. Despite the explanation, Yujin's tension was visible. His sister noticed that he seemed a little stiff, without imagining the real reason behind his concern. Despite his concern for his brother, Yujin Oh forced a smile to disguise his tension, trying to maintain his composure in front of his sister. She in turn changed the subject, complaining about their grandmother's stubbornness. Yujin just listened, still lost in his own thoughts. Suddenly, his sister's attention was captured by someone in the middle of the crowd, and her expression changed instantly. Confused by this sudden change, Yujin followed her gaze, trying to understand what had happened. She had spotted President An, an important figure who was present at the event. His company, Ment, had been growing exponentially, making his presence there a major event. While his sister seemed to be processing the information, Yujin remained pensive, simply watching the situation unfold. The mere mention of his grandmother made Yujin anxious, causing him to worry about his appearance before she arrived. At that moment, a man approached and called him by name, confirming his identity as Yujin Oh from Clean Peace. The stranger had a confident air and a smile that seemed friendly at first glance. He introduced himself as David An, President An's son, explaining that he was accompanying his father at the event. Yujin noticed the resemblance between father and son, and concealing any surprise, formally introduced himself. The two then sealed their acquaintance with a handshake. As David began to walk away, he stopped and turned back, as if he had one more thing to say. Only the friendly tone disappeared. David accused him of being the man who came between him and Shion Lee. The cordiality was just a facade. The sudden accusation left Yujin Oh speechless. He could hardly believe what he had just heard. David, on the other hand, continued with a smile on his face, accusing Yujin of trying to steal another man's girl, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Yujin tried to defend himself, arguing that, as far as he knew, Shion Lee was single. But David began to tell a completely different story, with an expression of pure romance. He claimed that, although they weren't officially together yet, he and Shion had very serious feelings for each other for quite some time. David's acting was so convincing that Yujin began to doubt everything. He was left wondering if the guy was really telling the truth or if he was just deluding himself about his relationship with Shion. It was then that David made it personal, saying that looking at Yujin reminded him that history always repeats itself. The provocation hit its mark. David revealed that he knew Yujin's darkest secret, calling him an illegitimate child. Yujin's composure broke instantly. The verbal attack continued, with David blaming Yujin for being born and destroying a happy family. Yujin's expression changed completely. The surprise gave way to a frightening coldness. David then connected Yujin's past with the present, accusing him of once again deliberately coming between a couple. The accusation that it was in his blood to destroy the lives of others brought up painful memories that Yujin struggled to forget. But the provocation went too far. That final insult awakened something different in Yujin. The pain gave way to a cutting determination. The rival turned to Yujin, interrupting the discussion with a mocking smile. He acted as if he had already won the fight before it even ended. Noticing the escalating tension, Shion touched Yujin's arm, trying to get his attention and prevent the situation from getting worse in front of everyone. The scene, of course, did not go unnoticed. The party guests began to whisper among themselves, curious about the commotion that was forming. Yujin could barely contain his anger. A single thought echoed in his mind. He wanted that man to disappear from his sight forever. But instead of exploding, Yujin changed tactics. He turned to Shion, put his arm around her shoulder, and with a forced smile said he needed to talk to her. And so, Yujin guided her away from the commotion, leaving his rival behind, watching the scene with an expression of pure frustration. The rival didn't lose sight of them, watching their every move from afar, clearly annoyed at being left talking to himself. Meanwhile, the party continued. Businessmen laughed and chatted, completely oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. For the rival, however, the night had soured. He stood there, dwelling on the public humiliation and Yujin's attitude. The luxurious atmosphere of the hall contrasted sharply with the tension that still hung in the air, showing how appearances can be deceiving. Suddenly, a new figure entered the venue, bringing with her an aura of power and authority that silenced part of the hall. Her arrival was noticed by everyone. Murmurs spread as the guests recognized the woman who had just entered. It was Mi-suk Park, the president of the SG group, and, to the surprise of many, Yujin's grandmother. Already composed, Yujin was talking to Shion. He felt relieved that his grandmother had arrived late, as she almost saw him lose his composure moments before. Shion also seemed more relaxed, commenting to a guest about how frustrating the traffic had been, as she prepared to greet the matriarch. For a brief moment, Yujin managed to relax, believing the situation had finally calmed down. But that tranquility was interrupted the very next instant. His grandmother, Chairwoman Mi-suk Park, stared at him with a seriousness that cut through the air. Her presence was enough to undo any facade of calm he was trying to maintain. Still, Yujin turned with a forced smile, determined not to show weakness in front of everyone. Shion, however, noticed the immediate tension. She saw the exchange of glances and understood that the situation was much more delicate than it seemed. An assistant watched from afar, maintaining a neutral posture, but clearly attentive to the matriarch's every move. The SG group family was now gathered, and all eyes in the hall turned to them. The whispers started immediately. The guests commented on the family's imposing presence, which stood out at the event. One of the businessmen pointed discreetly, impressed with the aura of power they conveyed. He commented to a colleague that the family looked truly impressive, solidifying their reputation among everyone. Chairwoman Mi-suk Park, in particular, was the center of attention. Her presence was felt by everyone, especially by her grandson. Yujin's heart raced. His grandmother's proximity brought back an overwhelming pressure that he struggled to forget. It was then that Shion decided to intervene. With a quick and subtle movement, she held the matriarch's arm. She suggested that his grandmother greet President Hong from another company first. Mrs. Park, surprised, questioned the reason for this change of plans. With a calm smile, Shion explained that President Hong had come from afar just to see her, creating the perfect excuse to pull his grandmother away from Yujin. Shion's intervention made Chairwoman Park thoughtful. The excuse was good, but the young woman's attitude was unexpected. Still, the matriarch decided to follow the advice, agreeing that she should go meet the other guest first. As his grandmother walked away, a relative approached Shion and treated her with condescending familiarity, as if she were a child. With the crisis momentarily resolved, the group broke up. Yujin, however, stayed away, watching everything from afar. He saw Shion being accompanied by his aunt, feeling a pang of gratitude for the help she had given him. Shion looked back for a moment in his direction. She gave a slight nod, a silent sign that he was free for now. Yujin returned the gesture, a discreet smile appearing on his face. That small act of rebellion had given him a breather. He then decided that it was enough. He had fulfilled his role just by showing up. Staying longer would only irritate his grandmother. And so, without thinking twice, Yujin turned and left the event. Hours later, he finally arrived home. The silence of the apartment was a welcome relief after the tension of the night. Only his cat, Sammy, was sleeping peacefully on the sofa. The sound of the door opening, however, woke the feline from its deep sleep. Yujin entered, announcing his arrival to the only resident who was waiting for him. He approached the sofa, apologizing for the delay, and asking if the cat had already eaten. It was his way of decompressing. Yujin tried to approach Sammy with a friendly voice, asking if the cat wanted a treat to break the ice. He reached out with a smile, hoping for a warm welcome after such a long day. But the response was immediate and painful. Sammy not only rejected him, but attacked him, leaving Yujin completely surprised and without reaction. Instead of anger, a resigned smile appeared on his face. That behavior was strangely familiar. As the cat walked away with disdain, Yujin thought he was a lot like his grandmother. Neither of them seemed to like him very much that day. Later, lying in bed, the weight of the night finally collapsed on him. Yujin felt pathetic for not having been able to show his grandmother how independent he had become. On the contrary, all she saw was an emotionally unstable grandson, exactly the image he most wanted to avoid. For a moment, he blamed a man named David Ahn for all of this. If he had kept his mouth shut, none of this would have happened. The memory of that encounter still haunted him, being the root of all his discomfort. But Yujin soon corrected himself. There was no point in blaming others for his own problems. He reflected that his older siblings, especially his sister, would have maintained their composure. She managed to distract Grandma naturally, and he needed to learn to do the same. And then, a new and terrible worry struck him hard. He realized that he might not have been able to keep up appearances in front of Shion either. The mere thought left him completely disconcerted. Yujin was deeply embarrassed, remembering that Shion was very perceptive. She surely had noticed his instability. Her image came to his mind. He tried to calm down, telling himself that the past was the past, and that the future was what really mattered. Yujin tried to calm down, but another memory disturbed him. He recalled what David Ahn said about Shion, but quickly dismissed the thought, reaffirming to himself that he trusted her. However, there was another part of that conversation that he couldn't ignore. The accusation that he was an illegitimate son hit him hard, bringing back old insecurities. That word reminded him of the only person in his family who treated him that way, his grandmother. She was the source of all this misunderstanding, always putting authority and appearances above everything else. He knew that, for her, the family's reputation was the most important thing in the world. Because of this, in public, Grandma always treated him like a beloved grandson. It was a facade to protect the family name, and only those closest to them knew the truth. This realization led him to an uncomfortable conclusion. He didn't want to distrust anyone, but the pieces began to fall into place. The person who spread that malicious rumor could only be someone from within. It had to be a relative or a close friend, someone who knew the unresolved conflict between him and his grandmother and decided to use it to hurt him. The weight of suspicion consumed him. While Yujin dealt with his demons, the night continued in another part of the city. In her apartment, Shion's friend came out of the shower feeling completely refreshed. However, seeing Shion sitting on the couch, motionless and with a lost look, she realized that something was wrong. Her friend seemed to be on another planet. Shion didn't move, completely absorbed in her own thoughts, oblivious to everything around her. Her roommate tried to get her attention, startling Shion out of her trance. Worried, she asked what was going on, and why Shion seemed so spaced out. She then realized that her friend's focus was on her cell phone, and was direct, asking if she was waiting for someone's call. Her roommate's question caught Shion by surprise. She was, in fact, waiting for something, but she didn't know how to answer. Her friend's insistence left her completely embarrassed. Shion didn't have a simple answer to give. In her mind, she began to make excuses. Maybe some student's parent had gotten Yujin's personal number again. She remembered that he had 2 cell phones, one for work and one personal. But that wasn't the truth. She smiled awkwardly, admitting to herself the real reason for her anxiety. The truth is that the situation was much more complicated than it seemed. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Yujin also couldn't sleep, tossing and turning in bed with the same thoughts that tormented him. The night passed, but the restlessness persisted, like a faucet dripping non-stop. The next morning, even after a shower, Shion realized that the feeling hadn't gone away. It was a constant sensation that she could no longer ignore. She finally admitted to herself what was happening. She was, little by little, feeling attracted to him. Shion began to remember how Yujin always took the initiative to approach her first. She thought of his gaze, always curious and bright when he looked at her. Every time their eyes met, she felt completely hypnotized. And just like the faucet that wouldn't stop, this new feeling for Yujin continued to grow inside her, drop by drop. After admitting her feelings, Shion couldn't help but imagine a future where, after all, she and Yujin would end up together. But this reverie was interrupted by a shock of reality. She realized she needed to be careful. Her feelings could complicate things with her friends, and the last thing she wanted was to create an awkward atmosphere between them. Later, already lying down to sleep, her friend started talking, completely oblivious to Shion's thoughts. All excited, her friend suggested that they plan a trip, since their schedules never matched the previous year. Shion listened in silence, but the day's fatigue was already weighing on her eyes, and it didn't take long for her to completely drift off. Her friend kept talking about how crowded the beach would be, not noticing that Shion wasn't listening anymore. She stirred a little, still excited about the trip plans. While Shion slept soundly, her friend talked about the need to make a reservation as soon as possible. It was only then that she noticed the silence and saw that Shion had already fallen asleep. A worried thought popped up. She remembered that Shion had seemed a bit down since her last relationship ended, but she felt like there was something more. Could something have happened that her friend couldn't even confide in her about? With a caring gesture, she gave Shion's hand a light tap, and in silence she promised herself that just as she trusted Shion, she would make her friend feel that she could also trust and lean on her. She remembered how their friendship started. Despite a difficult beginning, it was in a moment of shared pain that they became true friends, a bond that time did not erase. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, an important business event was taking place. On stage, a representative from the company Clean Peace spoke confidently, stating that his company would be the center of attention at that conference. Every word and every gesture was captured by the cameras. And then, the most anticipated moment. A handshake sealed a new partnership. Under the flashes of the photographers, the agreement was made official, representing a big step for the company. As the day ended, the city calmed down. Back at the office, the exhaustion was palpable. One of the employees, exhausted, asked President Kim if they could finally rest. The day had been long, and the tension of the event had taken its toll on everyone. The other colleague was completely out of energy, but relieved that they had overcome the biggest obstacle. Seeing the state of his team, President Kim found it funny and dismissed them, saying they could go home and have fun. One of the employees, now more excited, commented on how this was a great opportunity for the company to grow. The atmosphere in the office was one of optimism and celebration for the success of the event. The employee then joked with the boss, saying that he must have his own plans to celebrate, of course, without the team. Amid the general joy, however, one of them became thoughtful, observing the interaction in silence. The colleague tried to disguise it, saying it wasn't a big deal. He had just realized once again how adventurous Yujin was, and he admitted that was exactly what he liked about him. Yujin was visibly surprised by the sudden compliment, not quite knowing what to say. A short time later, he said goodbye and walked alone through the parking lot. The sound of the car door unlocking broke the silence. Already sitting behind the wheel, Yujin was quiet for a moment, immersed in his thoughts. As he drove, the previous conversation still echoed in his mind. The idea of not being ambitious enough bothered him. This transported him back to his childhood, to a time when his older brothers were already being prepared to take over the company. He remembered looking up at the huge family mansion, seeing his grandfather on the balcony. At that time, no one expected anything from him. He was completely ignored, an invisible figure to the family that only had eyes for the main heirs. Back in the present, the memory made him uncomfortable. This lack of expectation shaped him, leaving him without a clear goal in life for a long time. Determined to push these thoughts away, he picked up his cell phone to make a call. It was to Shion. Yujin asked how she was, wanting to know about her routine and college. On the other end of the line, Shion replied that everything was the same, now that exam season was over. However, Yujin noticed something different in her tone of voice. He felt that she seemed a little down and did not hesitate to ask if something had happened. Yujin's sincerity caught her off guard. He was the only person who noticed this sadness in her voice, even when she tried to hide it. A small smile formed on his face. He felt that somehow he was managing to connect with her on a deeper level. On the other end of the line, Shion listened in silence, processing the perception and care that he showed. It was then that Yujin mustered the courage and asked a question that went beyond simple conversation. He wanted to know if he could get even closer to her. He opened up completely, asking if he could be vulnerable in front of her, asking for a comfort he might never have had before. The honesty of the request left Shion speechless. She didn't expect this level of openness and sincerity coming from him. Later that same night, Shion walked down a quiet street. Apparently, her answer had been yes. She was on her way to the place Yujin had chosen for their meeting, a place he promised would be special. Upon entering, she came across a cozy and discreet restaurant. It was the perfect setting for the conversation they needed to have. The table was already set, with a meal that looked as welcoming as the place itself. Yujin watched her as she settled in, pleased to see that she seemed to like his choice. Shion then poured him a drink, a simple gesture that showed how comfortable she was already feeling. Yujin just watched with a serene smile, appreciating that moment of calm and connection between the two. He then began to tell her about the restaurant, explaining that there was a special dish there that he hadn't been able to try the last time he visited. Yujin also mentioned that the place didn't have a menu, just like another restaurant they had already been to, and Shion found the coincidence interesting. It was just another little thing they had in common. Shion realized that Yujin was the type of person who found happiness in the simplest things. It was a quality she admired in him. But a noise on the table broke the light mood. Yujin then changed his expression, preparing to share something deeper with her. He began to tell a personal story, an event that had deeply marked him. It was a painful memory that he was about to relive. Yujin said that, on one occasion, he had seen his grandmother for the first time in almost 6 months. He was excited and nervous about the reunion. The young man missed her a lot and hoped things would be different this time. The expectation was high, and he really wanted that moment to be special. Upon meeting her, Yujin greeted her with a warm and hopeful smile, but his grandmother didn't even respond. She simply turned her back and ignored him completely. Yujin's smile disappeared instantly. The rejection was a hard and unexpected blow. He felt that, for her, his presence was uncomfortable, as if he were a real nuisance to the family. Shion listened to the story attentively, beginning to understand the depth of the pain he carried. Yujin continued, explaining that his grandmother smiled openly at his older siblings, but the smile always disappeared when she saw him. He just wanted to receive a drop of the affection she gave to others, but it seemed that even that was asking too much. That difference in treatment hurt him. He wondered what kind of to break the ice. The man tried to strike up a casual conversation, seeking to better understand the woman in front of him. She, however, only listened in silence, maintaining a reserved and distant posture. But the woman wasn't there for small talk. She cut off his attempt with a direct question, making it clear that she only wanted to get straight to the point that really mattered. Caught completely by surprise, the boy was left speechless. He realized right away that his attempt to stall had failed miserably, and that perhaps he had said more than he should have. Her reaction was a tired sigh. Apparently, she was already used to his excuses and had no more patience for it. That sigh of hers was clearer than any word. He realized that, this time, the usual excuses wouldn't be enough. But what he said next left her speechless. It wasn't an excuse, but something she never imagined hearing from him, catching her completely off guard. At that moment, he opened up completely. It wasn't an apology, but an honest declaration that she would never expect to hear. spoken with a vulnerability that he rarely showed. His words hung in the air, followed by a deafening silence. He had opened up completely, and now the weight of that confession seemed to fill all the space between them, awaiting an answer. But Kiwanda, having said that, he just waited. Every second of silence that followed was torture, and the answer that would come next could change absolutely everything between them. And then the answer came. The fear and uncertainty that consumed him simply vanished, giving way to a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. In that instant, everything had been worth it. The memory that brought that warmth was of a simple, happy day, a moment when she, with an infectious smile, suggested they order more food, enjoying each other's company without a care in the world. Infected by her joy, he responded with the same enthusiasm, ordering more egg rolls. Their happiness lived exactly in those simple moments, where a food order became an unforgettable memory. Meanwhile, the restaurant around them bustled with life and conversation. The couple's private world was just a small bubble of happiness amidst the hustle and bustle of that night, and at the center of that bubble, a silent toast sealed the moment. A simple gesture that said everything, without needing a single word. The night started well, with Shion praising Yujin's skill at mixing drinks. The alcohol was already making them both looser and more relaxed. Yujin, all proud, confirmed that he was indeed an expert on the subject, saying that his whole family and friends trusted him with the task. In the middle of the conversation, he leaned in to tell a secret, something that seemed to make him a little shy. The big secret was that, contrary to what was expected, he actually really liked sweets, although he didn't eat them often. Shion couldn't contain herself and found his confession adorable. Far from being strange, it only made him more captivating in her eyes. Seeing her positive reaction, Yujin felt an immediate relief. He was genuinely happy that she didn't think his peculiar taste was a bad thing. The conversation then flowed to other preferences, and they discovered that they both had a high tolerance for spicy food, finding another common ground. With another toast, they celebrated the small discoveries and the harmony that grew between them with each passing minute. The hours flew by, and the empty bottles on the table were proof of how pleasant the night was being. What started as a convenient dinner to escape an awkward situation turned into a genuine encounter, full of laughter and complicity. And the night, which seemed endless, gave way to a new morning in the city. The sound of a cell phone vibrating broke the silence of the room. Under the sheets, the scene made it clear that the previous night had ended in a way neither of them expected. Shion woke up slowly, still sleepy, wondering who could be calling so early. It was only when she turned around that reality hit her. She wasn't alone. Yujin was there, next to her, already awake. The wave of memories from the night before hit her all at once. Shion could barely process what had happened. He was right there, next to her. The night hadn't been a dream, and his proximity only made everything more real and confusing. 1,000 questions arose in her mind, floating in the void. How did they get to that point? And more importantly, what would happen now? In a panic, Shion could only think that she had completely lost her mind. This couldn't be really happening. The awkward silence was broken when the two finally looked at each other. No words seemed right to describe that moment. Meanwhile, a new day was beginning in the city. Life went on as normal, oblivious to everyone's personal chaos. Yujin arrived at work trying to maintain his composure, as if the morning had been nothing out of the ordinary. His employees greeted him as they always did, calling him boss. For them, it was just another morning at work. The office was busy, with everyone focused on their daily tasks. However, one of his colleagues noticed that there was something different about Yujin and tried to get someone else's attention discreetly. She pointed at something on him, leaving Yujin completely confused about what could be wrong. The colleague then showed a room that was strangely dark and messy. Without giving him time to process, she pushed him towards the place, insisting that he see for himself. Upon entering, Yujin was paralyzed. The situation inside that room was much worse than he imagined. Sitting in the middle of the mess was a man with an expression of total defeat. Eugene problems were just beginning. Eugene stared at the man in front of him, who seemed to have completely lost the will to live. He was desolate, unable to face the situation. Trying to get some answer, Eugene shook him and asked what had happened. But the boy seemed to be in another world, without reaction. The answer that came next, however, caught Eugene completely by surprise. The man finally raised his head and, with a lost look, admitted that he had made a terrible mistake. He started to talk about the day before, but stopped in the middle of the sentence, as if shame prevented him from continuing the story. Eugene, however, needed answers. The silence was only worsening the weight of the situation. He lost his patience and demanded that the man finish speaking. The suspense was driving him crazy. A few days passed. Life in the office seemed to continue as normal, as if nothing had happened. Inside the building, the workday continued, with everyone focused on their daily tasks. One of Shion's colleagues seemed to be in a good mood, organizing some documents on his desk. He decided to strike up a conversation with Miss Lee, asking if she had already had lunch, but his own rumbling stomach interrupted him. Shion, however, was completely immersed in her work, focused on the computer screen. She exuded an aura that left a very clear message for everyone around. It wasn't a good time for conversation. The colleague understood the message instantly. He quickly fell silent, realizing that he had chosen the wrong time to socialize. Shion's concentration was total, and any small interruption was met with frightening intensity. After a day of intense work, Shion finally left the room. She needed a moment to breathe and face the thoughts she had been avoiding. Meanwhile, Eugene also couldn't concentrate. He wondered if he should try to understand what really happened the night before. The memory of that situation was still fresh and, above all, very confusing for both of them. Shion found an empty bench and simply collapsed. Now that she was alone, all the anxiety she had tried to suppress came to the surface at once. The memory of the night before haunted her. She didn't understand why she had drunk so much, to the point of completely losing control. Suddenly, the shame exploded. She panicked, convinced that Eugene remembered everything, and that she would never have the courage to ask about it. The frustration was so great that she could only hide her face, feeling the overwhelming weight of regret. The silence that followed was filled only by her anguish and low sobs. Just then, her cell phone vibrated, pulling her out of that trance. They were messages from friends, talking about a normal world that seemed very distant from hers. But each notification was like a blow to her conscience. The guilt was so great that it felt almost physical. She looked at Eugene's name on her cell phone. He still hadn't sent a message, and Shion didn't know if she felt relief or even more anxiety because of it. Her fingers hovered over the screen, completely frozen by indecision. Her hand trembled slightly. Sending a message seemed like the hardest thing in the world at that moment. And so she stayed, sitting alone, caught between the fear of starting the conversation and the agony of not knowing what he was thinking. The sun began to set, and with the end of the day, the chance to resolve things seemed to be running out as well. After a full day of mental torment, Shion finally returned home, exhausted and without any answers to her questions. Each step on the stairs seemed heavy, echoing the exhaustion she felt inside and out. She was completely exhausted. The indecision about what to do about Eugene had consumed all of her energy. She was close to reaching her apartment, the only place where she could finally rest and forget the world outside. But as she approached, something strange caught her attention. The door was ajar. An immediate chill ran down her spine. Why would the door be open? She was absolutely certain that she had locked it when she left in the morning. There was no way she could have forgotten. The tiredness gave way to a growing fear. Her mind began to race, imagining the worst possible scenarios. The small crack in the door seemed like a silent warning that something very wrong had happened there. Shion swallowed hard, her heart beating wildly against her chest. Gathering courage, she pushed the door open slowly and entered, moving with the caution of a stranger in her own home. She took a step inside in absolute silence, trying to hear any suspicious sound. And that's when she saw it. The shock instantly paralyzed her body. Her apartment was completely ransacked. Furniture overturned, drawers open, and objects scattered all over the floor. Someone had broken in. In a state of shock, her bag simply slipped off her shoulder, falling to the floor with a thud. Shion's body trembled uncontrollably. The fear was so great that she could barely breathe, paralyzed in place by the scene before her. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. A calm voice said they were worried, thinking they wouldn't find her. She turned sharply towards the voice. The panic increased as she realized she wasn't alone in the destroyed apartment. Two unknown men emerged from the shadows. With a sinister smile, one of them called her by name, confirming that she was Gamjun Lee's daughter. Her father's name hit her like a punch. A cold sweat ran down her face as the reality of the situation began to sink in. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Confusion and fear mixed in her mind, making everything even more surreal. The men blocked the door, making it clear that there was nowhere to run. Shion was cornered in her own apartment. With a trembling voice, she tried to explain that they were wrong, stating that her father had passed away a long time ago. The man laughed, mocking her response. He said that they had also been fooled by that same story in the past. Shion was silent, completely stunned. The confidence in the man's voice left her speechless, not understanding what he meant. He continued, questioning whether she really didn't know anything or if she was just a great actress. The accusation hung in the air, increasing the tension. The man took a step forward, invading her space. Instinctively, Shion backed away, shrinking from his advance. Then, he began to tell the truth. He revealed that Shion's father, Gamjun Lee, became addicted to gambling after his wife's death. To escape the debts, Gamjun's parents faked his death and held a fake funeral, deceiving everyone, including the creditors. With a cruel smile, the man looked at her. He commented that, in the end, because of her grandparents' lie, she was the one who got the worst of it. The cruel revelation made Shion remember her childhood, a time when for her, family was a safe haven, before discovering that it was all a well-told lie. But even in those memories, there were already cracks. She remembered her mother, fiercely defending her grandparents from some accusation, asking them to stop insulting them. In response, her father and the other man just laughed, mocking her loyalty. The seed of disrespect had been planted a long time ago. The image of the hero father shattered, replaced by the harsh reality of a man who fled his responsibilities, leaving a trail of destruction behind. The creditor continued the story, revealing that Gamjun Lee went so far as to use a friend's name to bet, and of course was caught again. He described her father's vicious cycle: the bet, the loss, the despair. A scene that repeated itself until it completely destroyed the lives of everyone around him. The man turned to Shion, his voice becoming serious. He went straight to the point. They were there looking for Gamjun Lee, and to make the message clear, he punched the wall hard next to her. A violent warning of what could happen. The threat was explicit. If Shion tried to hide or help her father, not only she, but all her friends, would be in great danger. Just then, the door opened. Yujin appeared, interrupting the scene and staring at the unknown man. The unexpected arrival caught everyone by surprise. Yujin asked who they were, while the collectors were startled by the sudden appearance. Yujin stood in front of Shion, acting as a shield. His expression was serious, and he didn't seem intimidated by the situation at all. One of the men looked at Yujin with a smirk, asking Shion if he was her boyfriend, as if he was amused by the scene. Seeing that the situation had changed, the man decided to back down for now. He said they were leaving and took a card from his pocket. He held out the card to Shion. It was a final warning disguised as a favor, telling her to call that number if she saw Gamjun Lee around. The man, however, didn't hand the card directly to her. He simply dropped it in a final gesture of contempt. The card fell to the floor right at Shion's feet, a silent reminder of the threat that still loomed over her. Soon after, the heavy footsteps of the collectors echoed through the house as they left, leaving a trail of tension behind. When the noise ceased, a heavy silence filled the room. Yujin and Shion stood still, processing what had just happened. Shion finally released the air she was holding, feeling a momentary relief that they were gone. Yujin, noticing her state, approached worriedly, asking if she was okay or if she had been hurt in any way. She tried to compose herself, assuring him that everything was fine. But the confusion was greater. Shion couldn't understand how Yujin knew she was in danger and how he appeared there at that exact moment. Yujin was a little embarrassed to explain. He admitted that it wasn't very respectful to show up like that, but he couldn't stand still waiting for her to call. He said that he went to the front of her building to wait for her. It was then that he noticed something strange. Yujin saw two suspicious men lurking around the place and overheard their conversation, realizing that something was wrong. Worried, he didn't think twice and ran inside the building, following the sound of the commotion coming from her apartment. Shion was completely speechless upon hearing the explanation. It finally clicked. With her voice still trembling, she admitted that if he hadn't arrived, she would have been completely alone to face those men. After the collectors left, a heavy silence filled the apartment. Shion remained still processing what had just happened. Yujin watched the scene, worry etched on his face. He knew he couldn't just leave her like that. The mess left behind was a physical reminder of the danger and violence that had invaded her space. That place no longer felt safe. Breaking the silence, Yujin finally spoke. He was visibly nervous, but his priority was Shion's well-being. Before she could say she was okay, or try to minimize the situation, he interrupted her. Yujin wasn't going to accept an empty response. He clenched his fist, frustrated and determined. The idea of leaving her alone there was simply unacceptable to him. Yujin asked if she could sleep there after everything. In a low voice, Shion admitted that she couldn't. There was no way to feel safe. It was then that he made an unexpected proposal. Yujin invited her to go to his place. Shion looked up, completely surprised by the offer. She wasn't expecting that. He continued, explaining that his building had good security and that there was a guest room available for her. But the main reason was another. Yujin confessed that, more than anything, he didn't want to leave her alone that night. With a sincerity that disarmed her, he asked her to give him a chance to be helpful and to help her feel safe again. His words touched her deeply. Faced with so much care and genuine concern, Shion made a decision. She accepted the invitation, apologizing for bothering him, even if it was just for one night. A short time later, they arrived at his apartment. Yujin led her to the guest room, a quiet and safe place, far from the chaos she had faced. Yujin took her to the guest room, explaining that she would have complete privacy and comfort there to rest. With a gentle smile, he told her to make herself comfortable and let him know if she needed anything before retiring. Shion just watched, relieved to finally be in a safe place after all the chaos she had faced. Alone, she finally sat on the bed, feeling the tension in her body begin to dissipate. Little by little, the calm returned. She was safe, at least for that night. It was then that she remembered that she hadn't even properly thanked Yujin and decided that she would do so the next morning. For a moment, a feeling of gratitude and comfort washed over her. But the peace was broken by a strange noise. A scratching sound coming from the door made her shrink back instantly. The sound repeated, and her heart raced. The fear that the collectors had found her returned in full force. But she wasn't alone. Yujin also heard the noise and stood in front of her, protecting her. The night was far from over.